now I would like to invite our speaker. This is Corey Hill, coming to us from Immigrants Are Welcome Here. Time and time again, our communities have stood up for community input, guaranteed due process, transparency, accountability, and human dignity. Give me just a moment to get you set up. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. So I think it's kind of emblematic of the work that the Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition that I am speaking to you from somebody else's office whose posters I eminently agree with, while in the outside space there are 100 people from all around Central Florida, variety of different organizations, deeply enmeshed in celebrating the work that has been done in this coalition. This coalition has only existed for a year, and planning for the road ahead. I came into the Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition through the work that's being done at Orlando 5051, which is also a very new organization. It's only been around for a year. And we also have a longstanding partnership with the Unitarian Church there in Central Florida that's been really fruitful. The Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition is made up of over 60 organizations from throughout Central Florida, some of whom, like Hope Community Center, who's sort of a cornerstone partner, have been engaged in this work for decades. And um, directly impacted folks are at the center of this work and of this movement. It's impossible to overstate the human cost of the horrible policies that we're seeing implemented around us. And I think that, we try and center those stories, but no matter how often you tell these stories, no matter how often you're in community with folks at the center of this, it's it's impossible to feel like you can't say it often enough that what is happening around us is simultaneously like too impossible to imagine the horror, but it's something that is deeply embedded in the fabric of this country. Um, and so what we're trying to do as part of this coalition, and in the work that we do at Orlando 5051, is to draw people in who may have been sitting on the sidelines and to, recognize that there are connections between these disparate threads of the work that many of us have been doing for decades with this moment that we're in right now. Um, so much of this moment that we're in was paved um, by by decades and centuries of the oppression that came before the founding of the United States in genocide and slavery, and decades following even the end of the Civil War, where there was an attempt to put all the pieces back into place for that oppression. This idea of racialized identity with white supremacist hierarchy is as American as can be. So we have a lot to fight against. And one of the incredible speakers that kicked things off this morning mentioned the parable of David and Goliath. And it was really powerful. So I'm just gonna, relay the same story, which is that I hope everyone is familiar with David and Goliath. If not, it's the story of this giant who was taken down by a slingshot. And the emphasis that Felipe put on this story was that the slingshot was well aimed at the weakest point of the giant. We are in a moment, we are up against a giant in terms of this ICE apparatus, the federal government, the what is truly a global fascist threat, and our ability to organize effectively and to come together and to, make sure that we are aiming true is our power. And what has been really, really powerful through the work of the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition is to see every day that no matter what we are up against, people still have radical love in their communities. They still want to show up for people who they have never met before. One thing that really illustrated this point in the immediate aftermath of Renee Good's murder in Minneapolis, we hosted a legal observer training. And this was at a moment when, for a lot of people, maybe their most recent or their only knowledge of what, ICE observation entailed was this flashpoint. They had seen someone wanting to protect their neighbors. They had seen someone who was willing to put themselves on the line, and they paid a very high price for that. And still, just days after this, brutal murder, we hosted an event to have folks learn legal observation, and we ran out of room in the church. There were people parked around the block. We had over 300 people there show up ready to get into the mix. And I think that this moment that we're in, to me, has shown that our love, that our commitment to the truth is so much more powerful than the hate and lies of who we're up against. And that gets obscured a lot of the time because if we're disconnected, if we're not in community with one another, if we're, atomized on social media, you tend to only see, even by well-meaning folks, you tend to only see the the trigger points, the bad news rolling in. And the bad news is pretty overwhelming if that's all that you're seeing, if you're only engulfed in one atrocity after the next. And what is really powerful about spaces like what the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition has provided and has been nurturing and growing is an antidote to despair. The hope that comes with being in community with other people and doing something meaningful about this moment that we're in is exceptionally powerful. There is always something that someone can do to get involved. And I think anybody who's addressing the crises that we're facing has been asked some version of the question like, well, what can I do? I cannot tell you how many times I have been asked that question by neighbors or online, etc. And the answer to that question is what, what can you do? There are countless levers that people can pull in this moment that we're in to make change happen. And the work that we're all engaged in um, is providing a pathway for people to get into these spaces. It's, um, I think a lot of folks particularly in the United States, have a view that there's only one way to get involved, or maybe one or two. They look at something like voting, they look at something like these giant protests, and that represents the full scope of their foreknowledge on the pathways to make change happen. So something that's been really powerful that I am really proud to have been learning from people that have been doing this for far longer than I have is that there's room for everyone in this movement. And the way that you make the movement move is by necessity going to look different for everyone. That, there are people who can be out there doing legal observation and taking that training and doing ICE watches. And there are people who can be committed to calling members of Congress. There are people who can collect mutual aid and distribute it throughout the community. There are people who can put together weekly Know Your Rights trainings. There are people who can do graphic design from home. There are people that can write letters to the editor. The point being that what is exceptionally powerful in this moment is finding ways to connect people to these opportunities to make change happen. The the impression that I get most often that we see in reflected in the poll numbers and all the things that are going on in the United States and in Florida is that a lot of people are most of the way there in terms of their understanding of what's going on. The the number of people who look at friends, family, neighbors being kidnapped out of daycares in front of schools of people who've lived here for decades and agree with that, that's a vanishingly small number of folks, and that number is getting smaller by the day. So the moment that we're in is is capturing the people who are having this aha, is capturing the people who don't like what they're seeing happen around them, but don't know what to do. And that space that's being offered by the Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition, by 5051, by Hope and Flick and all sorts of other statewide, nationwide, and local organizations, it's absolutely critical for the time that we are in, because the time that we are in is something of a race. We are in a moment of extreme crisis where um, the people who mean to do us harm are doing everything in their power to take away our ability to meaningfully stop them from doing so. They're trying to take away our ability to protect our friends, family, and neighbors. And we are also in a time when greater and greater numbers of people are recognizing that threat. They are looking at each other and saying, "Wow, as bad as I thought it was going to be, I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't think it would feel so existential." And those two currents are in a race. Is there enough time to make sure that all of the folks who are are getting activated, the growing numbers of people who want to get involved, are able to take enough action and to do enough to stop this? And that urgency animates the work that we're doing. And we always want to make sure that though things are urgent, though this moment is that we recognize that the way forward and the way out is not to embrace the worldview that has brought us to where we are. Spaces like I was very new to the Unitarian Universalist Church before a year ago when we started hosting a weekly event together with the Orlando Church on East Robinson. And in that space, which involves dozens and dozens of groups from throughout the community, we have people of all ages, people from a wide range of ideological perspectives and religious traditions and all walks of life. The thing that has really shown through in the spaces of this coalition work is this idea of radical love. And it feels odd to say some version that like caring for other people reads as radical in the time and the space that we're in. But it sort of does. The dominant narrative of the time that we're in is one of cruelty, is one of selfishness, is one of callousness, and this idea that your circle of empathy is a pinprick that it's maybe you and your family, and that's it, and that's all you have to think about. And the most basic principle that animates this work and drives everybody is a rejection of that idea, to embrace the kind of wild notion that we do have an obligation to care for one another, and that there's joy in building those ties. There's joy in building, reciprocal community networks, and there's joy in standing up for, you know, our immigrant friends, family, and neighbors. And the Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition work is grounded in this idea that um, we all do better when we build a space where everyone is welcome. That the ultimate goal is a world where everyone is welcome, uh, regardless of status, regardless of sexuality, regardless of religion. And the way that we work towards that is is together, and is in recognizing that when we separate ourselves out, when we look at these as different struggles, then we end up denying a part of our humanity and denying what makes our movements most powerful. And I was really heartened to see the slide for the Earth's Greatest Enemy film screening. And it heartens me to see in this space and in others a recognition that we have to acknowledge the ties between all of our struggles. That when we talk about Palestine, when we talk about trans rights, when we talk about immigrant rights and reproductive rights, we are ultimately talking about one struggle, which is um, a world where immigrants are welcome, where queer people are welcome, where you know uh, Palestinian people have the right to self-determination. All of these things are ultimately tied together, and if we don't recognize that, the the challenges that we face will never be solved because ultimately they are inextricably bound up together. And what has been a great joy for me, and I think I can speak for some of the things people have said to us over the past year and prior to that, is in being in community with people who are committing themselves to making these changes happen. Spaces like the Unitarian Church have been instrumental to that for decades. I'm really glad to have found a great partner in the Unitarian Church that we have locally. There's dozens and dozens of groups that are working on that here in Central Florida and Florida writ large. I'm Some of the folks who are engaged out in the Space Coast are people that I've met locally here in doing this kind of work, and the the urgency is great. The moment that we're in is the stories that we've heard of, someone in our community who was days away from giving birth when her husband was taken by ice and she had absolutely nothing. Like, it was it was absolutely heartbreaking to hear this story. As you can see, I am sharing the office. I think they were looking for something that the office holder has in here. They're heartbreaking, and yet at the same time, the response is what helps me know that we are ultimately going to win in this struggle. Because within just a day or so of hearing this story, our community organizations put out a call to, have people bring items for this person. And carful after carful showed up. People who'd never met, with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of items to help keep this person safe, to help welcome their child into the world. And for every story of brutality, I keep thinking about the response that we owe one another in this moment that we're in. And it has been a great honor for me to have been invited into spaces where this work is happening and to be in spaces with people that have been doing this for decades. And the thing that I take with me every day and that I would make sure that everybody keeps in their heart as they're thinking about this moment that we're in is the forces of darkness are throwing everything that they can at all of us right now, and the attack on our immigrant communities are the leading edge of this brutality. And instead of crumbling, instead of giving in, what we have seen is that people are doubling down. People refuse to let hate win, to let the lies win. And I am inspired every single day by the work of everybody in these spaces. I'm looking at somebody else's corkboard, and in front of me is a piece of art that says "Build longer tables and not higher walls," which is a quote from Jose Andres. And the fact that so many people are engaged in the work of setting out that longer table and trying to pull down those walls, for me, I couldn't be more inspired by this community, and also I've never been more certain that these efforts are going to ultimately prove fruitful and that we are going to come out on the other side of this and that we're going to win. So thank you so much for being a part of that effort, and thank you so much for letting me share what we're doing in Central Florida and beyond.